Morning everyone. Movie review time. The Wife, starring Jonathan Pryce and Glenn Close. Is it any good? Is it worth seeing? Should you spend your time at the movies? Stick around and you'll find out. I went to see The Wife with the wife, and the wife quite enjoyed The Wife, whereas I thought The Wife was rubbish. Don't mean the wife, my wife, I mean The Wife, the film. I thought it was awful, and if I were you, I wouldn't waste your time going to see it. But my wife thought it was good. So you pays your money and you takes your choice. Why did I not like it? Well, how long have you got? First of all, it is predictably boring, and it is boringly predictable. When I booked up for it, The Wife, i.e. my wife, not The Wife the film, my wife said to me, "What's it about?" And I said, well, I don't really know, but Jonathan Pryce plays a Nobel Prize winning author and Glenn Close plays his wife, and I imagine the twist is that she wrote the books. Well, what do you know? She wrote the books. Now, if you couldn't guess that that is the twist in the film, then I'm not sure that this is the film for you. The other reason is that it's just not very interesting. I say it's boringly predictable. The twist is obvious, but the film is just boring. It's not interesting. It's not enjoyable. It's not particularly well written, and I've not read the novel. I'm not familiar with the novel, and after the film, I have no intention of reading the novel. It may be a great novel. It may be a great film, but not to me. Glenn Close, well, you'll remember Glenn Close from Fatal Attraction. She was great. Who could forget the bunny boiling incident? You'll remember her from Jagged Edge. She was superb in Jagged Edge. And here she's okay. I know that women of a certain age complain that there aren't roles for women of a certain age. And perhaps filmmakers feel that they need to create roles for women of a certain age. But that doesn't mean that they're great roles, and it doesn't mean that they're great films, and this one just isn't. She doesn't have a great deal to do, Glenn Close. She gazes off into the distance, she gets angry. I'm sure there's a lot of seething emotion underneath the exterior, but it's all for very little purpose. Jonathan Pryce, he plays an American writer. A slight effort at an American accent might have helped, Jonathan, if you're listening, watching even. He plays an American writer, initially a professor of English literature, and he's teaching Glenn Close, or young Glenn Close, who's called Joan Archer, I think. And he's married, they fall in love. She writes a couple of short stories, and then she meets Elizabeth McGovern at a party. And Elizabeth McGovern, if you have a long memory, you'll remember her from Once Upon a Time in America, where she was beautiful. And here, well, the years haven't been kind to her, and perhaps that was the whole point. Anyway, she plays an older writer in 1958 America, and she meets Joan Archer at a party, and she says there's no point being a woman writer in 1958 America because nobody will publish you, and if they do, nobody will read your books. And so Joan Archer, who's an aspiring writer and has quite a lot of talent as far as one can gather, decides that she's not going to try and be a writer. She's not going to try and get her books published. What she's going to do instead is steal Joe, the professor, away from his wife, and she's going to write all his books, and they're going to be published under Joe's name, and Joe gets to become famous. And then he wins the Nobel Prize, and they go to Stockholm, and it all falls apart in a very predictable, rather uninteresting fashion. Max Irons, who may or may not be Jeremy Irons' son, plays their son, and he's not very good, although he doesn't have much to do in terms of the part that he's given, so maybe it's not his fault. Christian Slater, remember him? He plays a biographer, and he wants to write a kind of warts and all biography of Joe. And I didn't believe in him for a minute as a biographer. There's a photographer who is assigned to follow Joe and Joan around while they're being awarded the Nobel Prize. And one thing about photographers in films, she has a Leica, by the way, so you know she's a real photographer, but it doesn't have a shoulder strap. And that's another reason you know she's a real photographer in films, because real photographers in films never use shoulder straps. So she carries this Leica around without the shoulder strap, and she takes various photographs of Joe and his wife. And she kind of gets close to having an affair with Joe, but then she decides not to go through with it. And Jonathan Pryce, he's old now, he's not particularly handsome, he's not a particularly attractive character. So you think, why was she interested in him in the slightest in the first place? And then she decides she's not interested in him after all, and that makes very much sense. So he gets the Nobel Prize. There are some scenes of the Nobel Prize ceremony which kind of feel a bit half-baked to me. Maybe they ran out of money or something. They spent too much money on Glenn Close, and they didn't have enough money for extras to appear in the Nobel Prize winning ceremony. And then Joe and Joan have a massive argument about how he's getting the Nobel Prize, whereas really it ought to be her. And then he has a heart attack and then he dies. And then Joan flies back to America on Concorde with her son. And she decides that after they get back to America, she's going to tell her son and her daughter, who's just had a baby, everything about the true secret behind their marriage. Now, as I said at the beginning, this secret to me is not a secret. Now, maybe I'm just missing the whole point here. Perhaps everybody already knew that this was the twist, and perhaps the twist isn't really the twist. Perhaps there's another twist that I missed somewhere along the way, and I'm quite prepared to be proved wrong on this. Go see the film if you want to waste an hour and 3/4 of your time watching some predictable nonsense with Glenn Close acting reasonably well but nothing great, and Jonathan Pryce doing a kind of Jonathan Pryce thing, and Christian Slater, who is his career on the skids? Is he trying to do a kind of arty type film to bring it back on track? I didn't know, maybe he is. The other thing that rather annoyed me about the film is I'm a person who swears a lot in normal speech, and I don't have a problem with swearing, and in fact I quite like it. But when you have a film which has got a lot of swearing in it, it makes you wonder whether the writer is either being a bit lazy or is unable to display real emotional anger in any other way other than having the character say fuck this or fuck that all the time. It sounds like drivers in Biggin Hill when you're riding your bike. So that rather annoyed me. The whole issue around Joan writing the books but Joe being the published author, it didn't ring true for a minute. I'm sure things were very difficult for women writers in 1958 New York, but they weren't impossible, and as far as one can tell, Joan never even tries to have her books published, so she never even faces rejection. As an aspiring writer myself, I know what rejection feels like, and it feels exactly the same in 2018 as I'm sure it felt in 1958, whether you're a man or a woman. So I didn't buy that basic premise of the film, and that was part of the problem for me. But the fundamental problem for me, as I said at the beginning, is that it's boring. You don't care about the characters, you don't care about the twist, you don't care about the argument, you don't care about the Nobel Prize, and you don't care that Jonathan Pryce dies. But my wife enjoyed The Wife. See you next time.